Hello and welcome to Quick Learn Photography, straight to the point videos where I teach you everything that I've learned in over 10 years of professional photography. I'm James, and in this video we're going to talk about ISO, and by the end of this video you'll know what it is and how to use it. So ISO, you might see that phrase a lot on camera settings or hear it when you're learning about or watching things about or reading things about photography. You'll see that phrase ISO. It's really quite important. It's one of the big ones. It's like shutter speed, aperture and ISO. They're all part of the exposure triangle, and hopefully you've seen my previous videos on shutter speed and aperture if you're starting this photography course that I'm doing on YouTube. So ISO is one of the variables that keeps the exposure where you want it to be. ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. It's not iOS, that would be confusing, but yeah, that's what it stands for. But everyone just calls it ISO or ISO on the back of the camera. But it is very important. It's one of the most important things to learn about exposure. So we've learned about shutter speed and aperture. They're mechanical things. It's the effect of the physics of what they do allows more light to hit the sensor. So ISO is actually the power of the sensor itself. So the more you ramp up the ISO, it's putting more electric charge into the sensor and making it more and more sensitive to light. So it's basically revving the engine of that sensor. So to use a car illustration, it's like, say you come to a hill in a car and you're going uphill, really steep hill, you're going to have to rev the engine more to get it up there. Similar to ISO. When it gets darker and the other two have sort of like reached their max, shutter speed and aperture, then you start revving up the ISO. So a situation that you would use ISO in is, let's say you're in a darker environment and you've got your shutter speed set and you've got your aperture at its absolute widest of what your lens can do. So let's say you want to keep your shutter speed at 200th of a second because you want to capture general movement and freeze it, like walking, talking, gesturing, that sort of thing. You can't go any higher than 200th of a second because it's dark, but that's enough to just about freeze movement. Let's say you're photographing an event and it's in a low light situation and you can't use lighting and stuff. You've got your aperture at your widest, let's say f3.5 or f2.8, and it can't go any wider than that. So that's letting in the maximum amount of light to your sensor. But the image is still too dark. Those variables are too dark. If you drop your shutter speed any lower to let more light in, everything's going to be blurry. So the last resort then, the third part of the exposure triangle, is ISO. It's where you ramp up the power of the sensor and make it more sensitive to light. So then the image will get brighter and brighter. So that's how that works. I'm going to demonstrate that a bit on the back of the camera and you'll see how it works. And it's a really amazing thing to have. And anything with a sensor, mobile phones included, all use this capability of ISO. So that's great. You can make it as bright as you want, and some of the settings on cameras go to like 12,000, 22,000 ISO sometimes. You think, great, I can just ramp it up and get all the exposure I want. The downside to it is it can cause what's called noise or digital noise. You might have heard that phrase. It's where things start getting a bit grainy and pixelated. So the more sensitive the ISO, the more the ISO is being pushed, the more the image starts to deteriorate a little bit, and you get those little bits of grain in the shadows, and then it can get really bad where it looks like an electric static storm, like, so it looks pretty awful. So this is why bigger sensor cameras are really handy, because the bigger the sensor, the bigger the processor, the bigger the pixels, it can handle more ISO. They can suck in more light, and the processors are a lot more powerful to handle bigger ISOs, bigger numbers ISO, so you still get a cleaner image. They still will deteriorate, but a lot less than a smaller sensor, like a mobile phone or a smaller camera with like a tiny little sensor in it. The bigger the sensors, the more powerful the ISO becomes. Kind of like a car engine again. Imagine a little 1 litre engine car trying to get up a really steep hill at 70 miles an hour. It might have to thrash the engine, rev it to 6,000 revs, really pushing the max out of that engine, ready to blow up. But then you got a massive great V8 that has the revs really low and it's just chugging away, no problem at all. That's kind of like the bigger sensor cameras are like bigger engines on cars. They struggle less. So yeah, you have to be careful of noise and grain, and also if you're editing and pulling out the shadows, like that's called dynamic range. I'm going to deal with that on another video. Let's say you start pulling out the shadows, the higher the ISO on the image, the more those shadows will start, well, what you're pulling out will start to deteriorate. So ISO is one of the three key elements to exposure. The exposure triangle is very, very important, but you have to keep a leash on it. You have to know your camera's limit with it as well, especially if you're photographing professionally, or say you're doing a friend's wedding or something where you're actually getting paid. You don't want to give over photos that are like riddled with that digital noise and look really grainy. Sometimes the way things are now with current trends, which is quite fortunate, is everybody loves that old retro look. And that's what ISO does. It gives it that grainy look. So much so that in editing, like on Lightroom, you can actually add grain because it looks cool. But it has its place for that. You wouldn't want to do every photo like that. But you need to learn how to use ISO. It's part of the exposure triangle. So let's have a look at the back of the camera and I'll show you how to use it now. Okay, so I've got two different camera systems here. I've got a mirrorless one here and an older DSLR here. So I'll show you the mirrorless first because it shows you the exposure as you do it. So the ISO is there. I don't know if you can see that. Every camera's different, so you're gonna have to find the ISO setting. So if I press that, it's at 100 ISO now, okay? So if we go back to, we're at 3.5 and 1/80th of a second now. The shutter speed might be a bit too slow. So let's say you want to freeze movement, you're at 200th of a second now. Now you can see the image is quite dark and you're at the maximum aperture of like an entry-level lens. So this is where ISO kicks in. So press that and then you can start raising your ISO accordingly until it looks good. I mean, you can have it really bright, really low. So that looks okay, 400 ISO, and that's what you'd have if you was in that kind of environment. So that's how to do, change the setting on a mirrorless camera. And then if you go to a DSLR, this one, I'm gonna move this so I don't drop it. So this one is quite good because it's got a dedicated ISO button there, but you can't preview the image on the back because it's a mirror, it's got a mirror, it's a DSLR. So if you press that, this one starts at 200, and then you just adjust it accordingly and you'll see the exposure plus and minus in the viewfinder. But yeah, so this one's got a dedicated ISO button, so up to 1000, 1600. So sometimes with DSLRs you have to keep playing around 3 or 4 shots until you get it right, whereas with the mirrorless or a mobile phone you can see the exposure before you take it. So now we're in complete manual and I've got it at 100 ISO, which is usually the base level. So it's going to be at its cleanest, but it's not, it's less light, so less sensitive letting it in. So I've got the exposure right. I'm on an aperture of f2.8, so that's nice and wide. It's letting in a lot of light, so that's great. The shutter speed is video, so that's quite low, but this is just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is raise the aperture to something that makes it darker. Okay, so let's go to, say, f11. f9, f10, f11. Okay, so that's quite dark now. So the aperture is really shrunk down. You probably can't see me now. Now the ISO is at 100 and I'm not affecting it. So now I'm gonna ramp it up. So ISO 160, 200, 250, 320, 400, 500, 640, 800, we're getting there, 1000 ISO. 1250 ISO, I'm happy with that exposure. If you want it even brighter, 1600. Now, at this sort of level, 1600 ISO, smaller sensors cameras will start tapping out at this point. It's going to start looking really grainy and horrible, but I'm using a full frame camera here, but this is just for demonstration purposes. 2000 ISO, 2500. Oh, I think the shutter speed is adjusting now. So you get the point of what ISO can do, okay? So it will degrade the image a little bit more because there's so much electric charge and static going into the sensor or the processor to ramp it up, but you can see the effect. So that's ISO. Okay, so I hope that helps, showing you how to use it and some demonstrations as well. It's really, really important thing to learn ISO. So hopefully if you've watched the 3 previous videos, shutter speed, aperture and ISO, you're on your way now to controlling all the variables when it comes to exposure. So the next video I'm going to do briefly is about the exposure triangle, and then we'll keep going with more photography techniques to help you on your way with photography. So I hope you're going to enjoy this. Please subscribe if you want to keep up to date with these videos, because I'm just going to keep going and going, teaching you everything I've learned. But those 3 are the big ones to learn when it comes to exposure. So hope this video helped, and thanks for watching.